Siena Cathedral is a medieval church in Siena, Italy, dedicated from its earliest days as a Roman Catholic Marian church, and now dedicated to the Assumption of Mary, previously the episcopal seat of the Diocese of Siena. From the 15th century, the Archdiocese of Siena. It is now that of the Archdiocese of Siena, Old I Val d'Elsa Montalcino. The cathedral itself was originally designed and completed between 1215 and 1263 on the site of an earlier structure. It has the form of a Latin cross with a slightly projecting transept, a dome and a bell tower. The dome rises from a hexagonal base with supporting columns. The lantern atop the dome was added by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. The nave is separated from the two aisles by semicircular arches. The exterior and interior are constructed of white and greenish-black marble in alternating stripes, with addition of red marble on the facade. Black and white are the symbolic colors of Siena, etiologically linked to black and white horses of the legendary city's founders, Sienus and Ascius. Early history. The origins of the first structure are obscure and shrouded in legend. There was a 9th-century church with bishop's palace at the present location. In December 1058 a synod was held in this church, resulting in the election of Pope Nicholas II and the deposition of the anti-pope Benedict X. In 1196 the Cathedral Masons Guild, the Opera di Santa Maria, was put in charge of the construction of a new cathedral. Works were started with the north-south transept, and it was planned to add the main, larger body of the cathedral later, but this enlargement was never accomplished. By 1215 there were already daily mass said in the new church. There are records from 1226 onwards of the transport of black and white marble, probably for the construction of the facade and a bell tower. The vaults and the transept were constructed in 1259 to 1260. In 1259 Manuelo di Ranieri and his son Parry carved some wooden choir stalls, which were replaced about 100 years later and have now disappeared. In 1264, Rosso Padalio was paid for the copper sphere on top of the dome. A second massive addition of the main body of the cathedral was planned in 1339. It would have more than doubled the size of the structure by means of an entirely new nave and two aisles ranged perpendicular to the existing nave and centered on the high altar. The construction was begun under the direction of Giovanni di Agostino, better known as the sculptor. Construction was halted by the Black Death in 1348. Basic errors in the construction were already evident by then, however, and the work was never resumed. The outer walls, remains of this extension, can now be seen to the south of the Duomo. The floor of the uncompleted nave now serves as a parking lot and museum, and, though unfinished, the remains a testament to Siena's power, ambition, and artistic achievement. Underneath the choir of the Duomo, a narthex containing important late 13th century frescoes was found and excavated in 1999 to 2003. The frescoes depict scenes from the Old Testament and the life of Christ. This was part of the entrance of an earlier church, but when the baptistry was built, this underchurch was filled with rubble. The narthex is now open to the public. The bell tower has 6 bells. The oldest one was cast in 1149. Facade. The facade of Siena Cathedral is one of the most fascinating in all of Italy and certainly one of the most impressive features in Siena. Each of the cardinal points has their own distinct work. By far the most impressive of these is the west facade. Acting as the main entryway to the Duomo proper, it boasts 3 portals. The central one is capped by a bronze work sun, built in 2 stages and combining elements of French Gothic, Tuscan Romanesque architecture, and classical architecture. The west facade is a beautiful example of Sienese workmanship. Work began on the lower part around 1284. Built using polychrome marble, The work was overseen by Giovanni Pisano, whose work on the Duomo's facade and pulpit was influenced by his father Nicola Pisano. The lower portion of the facade is designed from Giovanni's original plans. Built in Tuscan Romanesque style, it emphasizes a horizontal unity of the area around the portals at the expense of the vertical bay divisions. The three portals, surmounted by lunettes, are based on Giovanni Pisano's original designs, as are much of the sculpture and orientation surrounding the entrances. The areas around and above the doors, as well as the columns between the portals, are richly decorated with acanthus scrolls, allegorical figures and biblical scenes. Giovanni Pisano was able to oversee his work until about 1296, when he abruptly left Siena, reportedly over creative differences with the Opera del Duomo, the group that oversaw the construction and maintenance of the Siena cathedrals. Pisano's work on the lower facade was continued under the direction of Camino di Crescentino, but a number of changes were made to the original plan. These included raising the facade due to the raising of the nave of the church and the installation of a larger rose window based on designs by Duccio di Buonansegna and commissioned by the city of Siena. Work on the west facade came to an abrupt end in 1317 when the Opera del Duomo redirected all efforts to the east facade. There is debate as to when work on the upper facade was completed. Most scholars agree that it was finished sometime between 1360 and 1370, though when it began again is not known. The work continued to use Pisano's plans for the facade with some adaptations under the direction of Giovanni di Cecco. Di Cecco preferred more elaborate designs, most likely inspired by the Orvieto Cathedral. The facade needed to be much higher than foreseen as the nave had, once again, been raised. The changes were probably needed to accommodate the raised nave and Di Cecco's more elaborate design scheme, heavily influenced by French Gothic architecture, caused the apparent division of the upper portion of the cathedral. Most noticeably, the pinnacles of the upper portion do not continue from the columns flanking the central portal as they normally would in such cathedrals. Instead, they are substantially offset, resulting in a vertical discontinuity which is uncommon cathedrals of the time, as it can lead to structural weakness. To adjust for this imbalance, the towers on each side of the cathedral were opened by adding windows, reducing the weight they needed to support. The upper portion also features heavy Gothic decoration, a marked contrast to the simple geometric design common to Tuscan Romanesque architecture. While most of the sculpture decorating the lower level of the lavish facade was sculpted by Giovanni Pisano and assistant depicting prophets, philosophers and apostles, the more Gothic statuary adorning the upper portion, including the half-length statues of the patriarchs in the niches around the rose window, are works of later, unattributed sculptors. Almost all the statuary adorning the cathedral today are copies. The originals are kept in the crypt of the statues in the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo. 3 large mosaics on the gables of the facade were made in Venice in 1878. The large central mosaic, the Coronation of the Virgin, is the work of Luigi Mazzini. The smaller mosaics on each side, Nativity of Jesus and Presentation of Mary in the Temple, were made by Alessandro Franchi. The bronze central door is a recent addition to the cathedral, replacing the original wooden one. The large door, known as the Porta della Riconoscenza, was commissioned in 1946 near the end of the German occupation of Siena, sculpted by Vico Consorti and cast by Enrico Manfrini. The scenes on the door represent the glorification of the Virgins. Siena's patron saint. On the left corner pier of the facade is a 14th-century inscription marking the grave of Giovanni Pisano. Next to the facade stands a column with a statue of the Conte Lupa, a wolf breastfeeding Romulus and Remus. According to local legend, Cneius and Aetius, sons of Remus and founders of Siena, left Rome with the statue, stolen from the Temple of Apollo in Rome. Interior. In the interior, the pictorial effect of the black and white marble stripes on the walls and columns strikes the eye. Black and white are the colors of the civic coat of arms of Siena. The capitals of the columns in the west bays of the nave are sculpted with allegorical busts and animals. The horizontal molding around the nave and the presbytery contains 172 plaster busts of popes dating from the 15th and 16th centuries, starting with St. Peter and ending with Lucius III. The spandrels of the round arches below this cornice exhibit the busts of 36 emperors. The vaulted roof is decorated in blue with golden stars, replacing frescoes on the ceiling, while the formularies and the tiercerons are adorned with richly elaborated motifs. The stained glass round window in the choir was made in 1288 to the designs of Duccio. It is one of the earliest remaining examples of Italian stained glass. The round stained glass window in the facade dates from 1549 and represents the Last Supper. It is the work of Pastrino da Pastrini. The hexagonal dome is topped with Bernini's gilded lantern, like a golden sun. The trompe coffers were painted in blue with golden stars in the late 15th century. The colonnade in the drum is adorned with images and statues of 42 patriarchs and prophets, painted in 1481 by Guiduccio Cozzarelli and Benvenuto di Giovanni. The 8 stucco statues in the spandrels beneath the dome were sculpted in 1490 by Ventura di Giuliano and Bastiano di Francesco. Originally they were polychromed, but later, in 1704, gilded. Next to the first 2 pillars there are 2 fonts, carved by Antonio Federighi in 1462 to 1463. His basin for the blessing of holy water was later transferred to the chapel of San Giovanni. The marble high altar of the presbytery was built in 1532 by Baldassare Peruzzi. The enormous bronze ciborium is the work of Vecchietta. At the sides of the high altar, the uppermost angels are masterpieces by Francesco di Giorgio Martini. Against the pillars of the presbytery there are 8 candelabras in the form of angels by Domenico Beccafiumi. He also painted the frescoes, representing saints and paradise, on the walls in the apse. These were partially repainted in 1912. Behind the main altar is a very large painting, Assumption of the Virgin by Bartolomeo Cesi in 1594. The presbytery keeps also the beautiful wooden choir stalls, made between 1363 to 1397 and extended in the 16th century. Originally there were more than 90 choir stalls, arranged in double rows. The remaining 36 stalls are each crowned by the bust of a saint in a pointed niche. The backs are decorated with carved panels, the work of Fra Giovanni da Verona in 1503. Pulpit. The pulpit is made of Carrara marble and was sculpted between the end of 1265 and November 1268 by Nicola Pisano and several other artists. This pulpit expresses the Northern Gothic style adopted by Pisano, while still showing his classical influences. The whole message of the pulpit is concerned with the doctrine of salvation and the Last Judgment. In the top level, 7 scenes narrate the life of Christ. The many figures in each scene with the chiaroscuro effect show a richness of surface, motion and narrative. On the middle level, statuettes of the evangelists and prophets announce the salvation of mankind. The pulpit itself is the earliest remaining work in the cathedral. The staircase dates from 1543 and was built by Bartolomeo Neroni. At the same time, the pulpit was moved from the choir to its present location. Mosaic floor. The inlaid marble mosaic floor is one of the most ornate of its kind in Italy, covering the whole floor of the cathedral. This undertaking went on from the 14th to the 16th centuries, and about 40 artists made the contribution. The floor consists of 56 panels in different sizes. Most have a rectangular shape, but the later ones in the transept are hexagons or rhombuses. They represent the Sibyls, scenes from the Old Testament, allegories and virtues. Most are still in their original state. The earliest scenes were made by graffito technique, drilling tiny holes and scratching lines in the marble and filling these with bitumen or mineral pitch. In a later stage, black, white, green, red and blue marble intarsia were used. This technique of marble inlay also evolved during the years, finally resulting in a vigorous contrast of light and dark, giving it an almost modern, impressionistic composition. The uncovered floor can only be seen for a period of 6 to 10 weeks each year, generally including the month of September. The rest of the year, they are covered and only a few are on display. The earliest panel was probably the Wheel of Fortune, laid in 1372. The she-wolf of Siena with the emblems of the Confederate cities probably dates from 1373. The Four Virtues and Mercy date from 1406, as established by a payment made to Marchese D'Adamo and his fellow workers. They were the craftsmen who executed the cartoons of Siena's painters. The first known artist working on the panels was Domenico di Niccolò di Iacori, who was in charge of the cathedral between 1413 and 1423. We can ascribe to him several panels such as the story of King David, David the Psalmist and David and Goliath. His successor as superintendent, Paolo di Martino, completed between 1424 and 1426 the victory of Joshua and victory of Samson over the Philistines. In 1434 the renowned painter Domenico di Bartolo continued with a new panel, Emperor Sigismund enthroned. The Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund was popular in Siena because he resided there for 10 months on his way to Rome for his coronation. Next to this panel is the composition in 1447 by Pietro di Tommaso del Manella of the death of Absalom. The next panel dates from 1473, stories from the life of Judith and the liberation of Bethulia by Urbano da Cortona. In 1480 Alberto Aringuieri was appointed superintendent of the works. From then on, the mosaic floor scheme began to make serious progress. Between 1481 and 1483 the 10 panels of the Sibyls were worked out. A few are ascribed to eminent artists such as Matteo di Giovanni, Nerico di Bartolomeo de' Landi and Benvenuto di Giovanni. The Cumaean, Delphic, Persian and Phrygian Sibyls are from the hand of the obscure German artist Vito di Marco. The Erythraean Sibyl was originally by Antonio Federighi, the Libyan Sibyl by the painter Guido Cozzarelli, but both have been extensively renovated. A large panel in the transept, the Slaughter of the Innocents, is probably the work of Matteo di Giovanni in 1481. The large panel below, the Expulsion of Herod, was designed by Benvenuto di Giovanni in 1484 to 1485. The Story of Fortuna, or Hill of Virtue, by Pinturicchio in 1504, was the last one commissioned by Aringuieri. This panel also gives a depiction of Socrates. Domenico Beccafiumi, the most renowned Sienese artist of his time, worked on cartoons for the floor during 30 years. Half of the 13 scenes from the life of Elijah in the transept of the cathedral were designed by him. The 8-meter-long frieze Moses striking water from the rock was executed by him in 1525. The bordering panel, Moses on Mount Sinai, was laid in 1531. His final contribution was the panel in front of the main altar, the Sacrifice of Isaac. Works of art. The cathedral's valuable pieces of art, including the Feast of Herod by Donatello, and works by Bernini and the young Michelangelo, make it an extraordinary museum of Italian sculpture. The Annunciation between St. Ancinous and St. Margaret, a masterwork of Gothic painting by Simone Martini and Lippo Memmi, decorated a side altar of the church until 1799, when it was moved to the Uffizi of Florence. The funeral monument for Cardinal Riccardo Petroni was erected between 1317 and 1318 by the Sienese sculptor Tino di Camino. He had succeeded his father as the master builder of the Siena Cathedral. The marble monument in the left transept is the earliest example of 14th-century funeral architecture. It is composed of a richly decorated sarcophagus, held aloft on the shoulders of 4 statues. Above the sarcophagus, 2 angels draw apart a curtain, revealing the cardinal lying on his deathbed, accompanied by 2 guardian angels. The monument is crowned by a spired tabernacle with statues of the Madonna and Child, St. Peter and St. Paul. In the pavement, in front of this monument, lies the bronze tombstone of Bishop Giovanni di Bartolomeo Pecchi, Bishop of Gross II, made by Donatello in 1427. It shows the dead prelate laid out in a concave bier in highly illusionistic low relief. Looking at it obliquely from the end of the tomb gives the impression of a three-dimensionality. It was originally located in front of the high altar and moved to the present location in 1506. The wall tomb of Bishop Tommaso Piccolomini del Testa is set above the small door leading to the bell tower. It is the work of the Sienese painter and sculptor Nerico di Bartolomeo de' Landi in 1483. The Piccolomini altar, left of the entrance to the library, is the work of the Lombard sculptor Andrea Bregno in 1483. This altarpiece is remarkable because of the 4 sculptures in the lower niches, made by the young Michelangelo between 1501 and 1504, St. Peter, St. Paul, St. Gregory and St. Pius. On top of the altar is the Madonna and Child, a sculpture by Jacopo della Quercia. Many of the Duomo's original furnishings, such as Duccio di Buon and Segna's Meister and Cimabue's stained glass window, have been removed to the nearby Museo dell'Opera del Duomo. Chapel of St. John the Baptist. The Chapel of St. John the Baptist is situated in the left transept. At the back of this chapel, amidst rich Renaissance decorations, is the bronze statue of St. John the Baptist by Donatello. In the middle is a 15th-century baptismal font. But most impressive in this chapel are the 8 frescoes by Pinturicchio, commissioned by Alberto Aringuieri, and painted between 1504 and 1505. 2 are repainted in the 17th century and a third was completely replaced in 1868. The original paintings in the chapel are Nativity of John the Baptist in the Desert and John the Baptist preaching. He also painted 2 portraits, Aringuieri with the cloak of the Order of the Knights of Malta and kneeling knight in armor. These 2 portraits show us a very detailed background. The Chigi Chapel. The small Chigi Chapel is situated in the right transept. It is the last most luxurious sculptural addition to the Duomo, and was commissioned in 1659 by the Sienese Chigi Pope Alexander VII. This circular chapel with a gilded dome was built by the German architect Johann Paul Short to the Baroque designs of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, replacing a 15th-century chapel. At the back of the chapel example is the Madonna del Voto, that even today is much venerated and receives each year the homages of the Contrade. On the eve of the Battle of Monteperti against Florence, the city of Siena had dedicated itself to the Madonna. The victory of the Sienese, against all odds, over the much more numerous Florentines was ascribed to her miraculous protection. 2 of the 4 marble sculptures in the niches are by Bernini himself, St. Jerome and Mary Magdalene. The other 2 are St. Bernardine and St. Catherine of Siena. The 8 marble columns are originally from the Lateran Palace in Rome. The bronze gate at the entrance is by Giovanni Artusi. Piccolomini Library. Adjoining the cathedral is the Piccolomini Library, housing precious illuminated choir books and frescoes painted by the Umbrian Bernardino di Beto, called Pinturicchio, probably based on designs by Raphael. The visual impact of these very colorful frescoes is stunning. The frescoes tell the story of the life of Siena's favorite son, Cardinal Annea Silvio Piccolomini, who eventually became Pope Pius II. He was the uncle of Cardinal Francesco Todeschini Piccolomini, who commissioned this library in 1492 as a repository of the books and the manuscript collection of his uncle. The ceiling is covered with painted panels of mythological subjects. They were executed between 1502 and 1503 by Pinturicchio and his assistants. The entrance is a finely carved marble monument with 2 openings with round arches, executed in 1497 by Lorenzo di Mariano. It contains a round relief of St. John the Evangelist by Giovanni di Stefano, and below the altar, a polychrome Pietà by the sculptor Alberto di Beto d'Arrosisi in 1421. Above this marble monument is a fresco of the papal coronation of Pius III, by Pinturicchio in 1504. In the middle of the library is the famous statue 3 Graces, a Roman copy of the Greek original. Pinturicchio painted this cycle of frescoes around the library between 1502 and 1507, representing Raphael and himself in several of them. This masterpiece is full of striking detail and vivacious colors. Each scene is explained in Latin by the text below. They depict 10 remarkable events from the secular and religious career of Pope Pius II. First is a high prelate, then bishop, a cardinal and ultimately Pope. Annea Silvio Piccolomini leaves for the Council of Basel. The storm scene in the background is a first in Western art. ESP ambassador at the Scottish court. ESP crowned court pert by Emperor Frederick III. ESP makes an act of submission to Pope Eugene IV. ESP, Bishop of Siena, presents Emperor Frederick III with his bride-to-be Eleonora of Portugal at the Porta Camollia in Siena. ESP receives the cardinal's hat in 1456. ESP enters the Lateran as pontiff in 1458. Pius II convokes a diet of princes at Mantua to proclaim a new crusade in 1459. Pius II canonizes St. Catherine of Siena in 1461. Pius II arrives in Ancona to launch the crusade. Beneath the frescoes, the psalters of the cathedral's sacristy are on display. These exquisite illuminations by Liberal of Verona and Girolamo da Cremona were executed between 1466 and 1478 and later carried on by other Sienese illuminators. Baptistry. Unlike Florence or Pisa, Siena did not build a separate baptistry. The baptistry is located underneath the eastern base of the choir of the Duomo. The construction of the interior was largely performed under Camino di Crescentino and was completed about 1325. The main attraction is the hexagonal baptismal font, containing sculptures by Donatello, Jacopo della Quercia and others. Gallery.